Hi, I'm Lenice Brothers, a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. This is the Period Story podcast, where in each episode, I sit down with a guest to talk about their period story. We get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods and so much more. Now, on to today's guest. Welcome to Season 4 of the Period Story podcast. For the first episode of the season, I'm so excited to have Alice Rose on the show, just in time for Fertility Awareness Week here in the UK. Alice is a fertility advocate, speaker, and consultant. After her own experience of 11 rounds of fertility treatment to conceive a daughter and 1 round of treatment for a baby boy who was born in February this year, she supports and empowers others through her Instagram community at This Is Alice Rose, the Fertility Life Ride podcast, and through live events with her business partner, Kat. Welcome to the show, Alice. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here. I'm really excited to have this chat.
So let's just get into the first question that I always ask, which is, tell me the story of your very first period. Can you remember it?
I can remember it. So I was 13 and I had wanted to have my period for a while because my friends had started getting their periods and I was like, oh, I really want to be a woman, you know. And finally, one day, it happened. But I mean, the actual memory is quite hazy. But the things that are really clear to me is how I felt about it. And I remember feeling quite excited, but also quite embarrassed. Like I was quite. And it's funny, isn't it? Because actually, I'm one of 4 girls, so I've got 2 older sisters and a younger one, and I've got a good relationship with my mum, and you know, she's the kind of mum who's really open, and she'll be very, you know, she's quite she's a little bit eccentric maybe even, and yet when it came to things like periods, we still didn't really have open conversations about it. So I felt quite like I didn't know how to bring it up with my mum. But I felt like I needed to tell her because I needed some period products. So I just remember writing this really awkward little note and leaving it on her bed to say, I think I've got my period, Mummy, something like that. And then she wrote me one back and left it on my bed with some pads that she dug out from somewhere. But I really remember her saying, you know, it's a bit difficult because I was brought up in the country, so it wasn't like we could pop down to the corner shop like, you know, I would do now. I live in a city. So she was like, I had to sort of like find these. I don't know why she didn't just ask my sisters. Like and in fact, she must have had loads of stuff lying around at that point because this was a long time ago now. So it just baffles me when I think, what were we doing sending each other these little notes? Like, why didn't she just come and knock on my door and have a conversation about it? It's really funny. And it just makes you think, gosh, maybe, you know, as kind of open as I thought we were, maybe we actually weren't, because I do think there was this kind of a bit of shame around it. And I felt embarrassed and I felt, you know, and the actual period that I got was a little bit, like it didn't feel like a proper one. So I almost was like, oh, is this it or is it not it? I wasn't really quite sure. So it was all a bit confusing and a bit embarrassing. That's my memory of my first period.
It's quite sweet that you passed notes to each other. I know that you say, what were we doing? But it's kind of a sweet memory that your mum, she kind of met your energy with the same energy. And that's kind of a sweet thing to do.
Very sweet. Looking back, you know, and that kind of sums her up a lot, actually. And she does do that. And she obviously realized that that's how I felt comfortable, you know, talking about it. So she was like, okay, we'll do notes.
So you said that there was this level of almost not discomfort, but, you know, it was maybe shame. You didn't really talk about it openly. So how did you, after you got your first period, how did you then learn what was happening to your body?
So I think I knew, biologically, I understood what was going on. I understood why we got periods. Because close friends of mine had already got theirs, I actually went to them. Like that's where I don't know why I didn't talk to my older sisters. I mean, we've got really good relationships, but still within the family, I don't know why it just wasn't really done. And, now we have much more open conversations. Now we're kind of all grown up. But yeah, at the time it was my friends. And I really remember really clearly, actually, my one of my best friends talking me through how to use a tampon. And I was sitting in the loo and she was outside, and she literally told me, open the thing, do this, do that. And she just kind of talked me through it. And that's a really, again, like quite a sweet, intimate little memory that I've got there. And I remember coming up being like, oh, I'm feeling quite proud of myself. And, it's a bonding thing, isn't it, between girls, I think, when you go through this. And it felt... It just sort of almost feels like a bit of an initiation into this new era of our lives. So yeah, that was quite sweet as well.
And then when you went into school, were there open conversations with your friends and then with the school about periods that you were getting through, like maybe lessons and then school year conversations?
So there were definitely open conversations within my friendship group. But again, what happened with my period is that I never got regular cycles, which led on to my fertility problems later in life, which of course is what I focus on now. But my periods were always completely erratic. They never followed the kind of textbook thing. So again, I kind of felt a little bit awkward and embarrassed about that, because we weren't really taught about that in school. What we were taught was that this is what happens every 28 days. This is what happens to a woman's body. And my body wasn't doing that. My body was doing something all of its own. And I sort of, again, felt a little bit embarrassed about talking about what was going on for me within my friendship group, because no one else seemed to be having these problems. I'm sure they were underneath it all. There must have been someone else within my group who was going through it. But I my close friends, the ones that I did have open conversations with, were just having periods like people do. So yeah, that was that.
So when you realized that the periods you were having were irregular, what did you do? What did you try to do about it?
I don't remember ever being terribly active in trying to sort it out in terms of getting to the bottom of it. What I remember doing is going on the pill, because that's what everyone was doing. So it was more about regulating my period actually than anything else. And I think I started on it when I was 16. And then because it regulated my periods, I kind of forgot about the fact that I never had regular ones before I went on it, and I just sort of, it was like putting a plaster over something, isn't it? You just go, okay, fine, that's working now, lovely, don't need to worry about that. But really, I hadn't actually got to the bottom of why it was so irregular and erratic anyway. So I just carried on. I just took the pill for years and years and years, as kind of all of my friends were doing. And it almost wasn't even really a question of it. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, I'll just go on the pill. And now there's so much more information about what people sometimes have reactions to, and different kind of pills and all the different kind of contraceptions available. Actually, a friend of mine has a platform called the Lowdown. I think it's called the Lowdown or the Down Low.
the Lowdown.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ali is actually a friend of my sister's, and she set that up. And I just think it's brilliant, because there was nothing like that before, was there, to kind of help women choose what contraception was correct or that would work for them. There just wasn't anything like that when we were growing up. So yeah, just went on the pill. Periods were, regular because of that. They weren't real periods, were they? That's the thing. Like pretend ones that didn't actually do anything. So yeah, it was not very sensible, really.
Well, you did the best with what you knew at the time. And when you then decided that it was time to come off of the pill. Talk us through what provoked that change, and then what happened with your periods then.
So I got married and decided to start trying for a baby. So I had been on the pill all of that time up until I was 30, I think, about 30, 31. Such a long time thinking about it, taking those drugs. Oh my goodness. Anyway, came off the pill because I wanted to try for a baby, and went to my GP to say, I'm going to come off the pill now. I didn't ever have regular periods before I went on the pill. Should we maybe investigate what's going on, like straight away? Because I sort of had my organized hat on, and I was like, I think I might have problems conceiving, actually, you know, when I'd grown up and realized that it probably wasn't great that my periods were so erratic. And she sent me straight away to actually have a scan and have a little bit of an investigation, which was really good. And then when I came off the pill, my periods were totally erratic again, so very irregular. My hormones went crazy, actually. When I first came off the pill, I had a really bad reaction hormonally, so my skin went crazy. And yeah, it definitely had affected me way more than I had realized. You know, that little pill that I was taking had a huge impact on my body's balance and everything. So yeah, but it kind of felt quite, now looking back, it felt good to get rid of it, go back to the basics and try to actually uncover what was happening in my body and why, and how I could help it. I mean, I could carry on talking here, Lenise, but I'm going to stop because I feel like I should wait for, because I really could just, yeah, there's so much to say about this, but please ask me more questions.
When you say that you want to go back to the basics, talk about what those basics were.
I suppose what I mean by that, and what I meant by that, was that I wanted to work out what was really going on. I wanted to work out why was my body not doing what I was taught in the textbooks at school that it should do. And when I say erratic, I really do mean, you know, they were wild. They were like up to 100 days, I wouldn't have anything. Or, you know, even when I started on fertility treatment, I started taking the ovulation drug Clomid. And the first time I took it, I did have a textbook 28-day cycle. And I thought, amazing, you know, this has fixed me. I'll be pregnant in no time. Brilliant. But then I didn't get pregnant that month. I had ovulated, but I didn't get pregnant. And then the next time I took it, nothing happened. Like, absolutely nothing happened. I didn't ovulate. I didn't get a period. And I was so confused. And I went back to the gynae who had put me on it in the first place. I was like, I haven't had a period, you know, it's been days and days now. What's going on? So she scanned me and had a look at what was going on internally on my follicles and everything. And she was like, yeah, it doesn't look like you've responded at all to the treatment. You haven't ovulated. I think you're going to need IVF. And that was like a bombshell, you know, because I was like, huh? What? I thought I just needed to take this little drug here and then my periods would regulate and then I would get, you know, pregnant. That was what I thought was going to happen. And it just didn't. So I seemed to have a very, and again, it was that feeling of like, my body isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Even when I'm taking these drugs, it still wasn't doing it. And that continued all the way through my fertility treatment. I was really, sometimes I would respond, sometimes I wouldn't respond. And it was just the most frustrating thing in the world and so difficult, you know, especially when you're trying to, you know, move on. And you constantly feel so stuck because your body is just not doing what it's supposed to do. And you feel a bit broken. You feel like a failure because you're just thinking, why is this, you know, so easy for everyone else? They just buy these little ovulation kit things. You get the smiley face. Oh, you've ovulated. Great. Now go and have sex. But I couldn't even get to that point. You know, it just wasn't happening. So the periods were, just very confusing to me.
Did they ever try to get to what the root cause of the irregular cycles might be?
So that's what happened after I'd been told by that gynae that I should have IVF. I felt like that was a really big leap from what I had been doing. And exactly as you say, I was like, yeah, but what's going on? Like, I need more information. I don't feel like jumping straight to that that is the correct thing to do. So I went and had a second opinion, and that was brilliant because she sat me down. She said, I think you might have, I think you've got polycystic ovary syndrome. You aren't you don't present in a typical PCOS manner, but I think you've got enough of the symptoms to suggest that that's what's going on. So then she talked me through lifestyle factors and changes that I could make. She explained to me about insulin resistance that can happen with PCOS and talked me through diet and nutrition and all of these different things. So I left that appointment feeling really kind of excited that I was going to be able to impact what was happening to my body and understanding it so much more. And it felt really, really empowering and quite, I was quite motivated after that. So I'm quite a good girl. Like, I like to stick to the rules. If someone's told me something that's going to work, I go, right, okay, here's my template, my little recipe. I'm going to just do exactly as they tell me, and then that will work. So I followed it to the letter. She was like, right, no sugar, this, that, and the other. She gave me this kind of plan. At first, I just cried my eyes out because I thought, well, I can't get pregnant and now I can't have a piece of cake. Like, that sucks. What the hell? And I felt really angry about it, and I felt really frustrated, and it felt really rubbish. And I just felt quite hungry, actually. I didn't understand how to eat in the way that she was telling me might have an impact on my cycles. So I actually had a nutritionist consultation because I thought, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I need somebody to help me. And that was brilliant. Like, I thought that was really, if I may say so, quite a smart move, because it helped me to, reaching out and getting that support and going to somebody who did really understand, who'd made their livelihood understanding, was actually really helpful. And she sort of, gave me all these recipes. And then I started to get, again, quite excited about it, because I was like, okay, there's all these different ways I can embrace what's happening to me instead of fighting it. So that's what I started to do. And it did have an impact. It had an impact on me as a whole person. The periods, again, it's hard to say what was going on, because once I started to make all these diet and lifestyle changes, I was also doing a lot of mental health well-being kind of self-coaching stuff. I was also having fertility treatment as well. So it was a kind of I was coming at it from all angles, and to try and holistically get my body to do what I needed it to do. And while it started to respond in terms of, I would then began to have periods, I still wasn't getting pregnant. So I did end up having IVF even after 10 rounds of treatment. And then I had success with IVF. But yeah, with periods, after I had my first baby, and I'm going to make a leap here, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So I had Matilda, and then I breastfed her for 10 months. And when I stopped, my periods arrived and just started happening like they're supposed to. And I was like, oh, this is what people were just experiencing all of those years when I was trying everything under the sun to just get my body to do this. And then it just started doing it. And I was amazed that I didn't have to, eat a special diet and take pills and do supplements and have acupuncture and everything that under the sun that I was trying to just get my body to have a period. It just was doing it by itself. It was amazing.
So just go back a little bit to the 11 rounds. It's 10 rounds. Was it 10 or 11?
10 unsuccessful, and then one successful round of IVF. Okay.
So that will take quite a physical and emotional toll on your body. So for listeners who might be going through the same thing right now, who are going through IVF or thinking about it, can you talk a little bit about the support that you were able to put together to get you through this process? And also, can you talk about how long this process was for you?
Sure. So in terms of the actual time period, because I was really proactive and impatient, it sort of started straight away. And I went into fertility treatment itself really about, you know, just literally the months that I wanted to start trying, because I went to the GP straight away, I then had, they also found a fibroid. So anyone not listening, that's a growth in the uterus. So they found that, and they said to me, that might get in the way when you're trying to conceive. Do you want us to get rid of it? And I was like, well, yeah, if it's going to get in the way, let's get rid of it. So I had an operation to remove that first. So it really was kind of straight in. Most people will be trying for quite a while before they get to that point. But because I was presenting with symptoms immediately, I just went straight there. So all in all, that whole experience, those 11 rounds, was 2 years and 2 months, which actually is not that long when it comes to a fertility journey. Most people will have a longer experience than that. But the intensity of what was happening was really a lot to deal with, and emotionally, you know, it took its toll. And I really believe that the way I got through that was to reframe what was happening to me. And I did that through, I like to say self-coaching, because I feel like that's what happened in the end. And the route into that, the gateway into being able to self-coach myself, was by doing something called the Artist's Way, which was it's a course, but it's just in a book. So somebody had given me this book, and it sat on my shelf this whole time. And while I was going through all of these failed rounds of treatment and feeling so frustrated and upset and alone and left behind and stuck, and I mean, it's horrendous, I felt like I needed to do something to take me out of that experience. So I started to do this course, and it's a course in rediscovering your creative self, or something like that. And I was at the time, I was an actor. And so it really appealed to me, this ability, you know, to reconnect to who I was. So I started doing that, and it had a huge impact on my mental health, my well-being, my motivation. Everything changed, my outlook changed. And at the same time as that, as I said, I was kind of coming at this from all angles. So I was seeing an acupuncturist, and originally that was to help with my fertility. But what I now see in hindsight was that it was just this huge support. It was like going to therapy, and it was, you know, blissful going to see her, because it took me out of my body for a moment, and someone else was holding me and taking care of me. And that was so important as well. I was also referred to a fertility counsellor through my NHS clinic, which was absolutely amazing. So I really advocate seeking support for anybody going through this as well. If you can, just, you know, find that support, and find specialist support, because it was really helpful to sit there, and she knew exactly what I was talking about when I was talking about Clomid or these feelings that I was going through. You know, she really did understand. And I later found out she understood on a personal level as well, because she was actually going through it herself. You know, while I was seeing her, she was also experiencing it. So those are the things. So it was the self-coaching, it was the support that I had, but it was also the lifestyle changes that I made, because, you know, the nutritional stuff and the healthy lifestyle that I was leading to try to get my body to help me ended up having a really positive effect on my mental well-being as well, because my moods were a bit more balanced. You know, I had way more energy. I just felt really good. And that's not something you hear very much when you hear people talking about going through infertility. And I really want to caveat that by saying it was still really, really hard. You know, I still felt the pain and the grief every time my cycle didn't work. I still wanted to be a mum more than anything else. But in between those periods of mourning, really, and grief every time something didn't work, I felt good. I felt good about myself. I felt good about my life. And I'm talking really passionately about this, because this really is, it's my raison d'etre, really, Lenice. Like, I really want to try and help others find that. I want to help others find that sort of reframe, and the idea that you can actually experience some joy and some success and peace in your life, even while you also go through that pain. So yeah, in a nutshell, not really a nutshell, a long answer, but that's what would happen to me.
Listening to your story, and the stories that I've heard from other women, either clients or women that I've spoken to, what always strikes me is how much they go through, how much you've gone through to have a baby. And it's just this journey, and so this something that you want so badly that I always get this sense that from other women I've spoken to, that you would do anything to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think about what happens after the baby. So you get the baby, and then you have the whole everything physically and emotionally that you're dealing with postpartum, plus caring for a brand new tiny little baby, but then also dealing with some of the trauma of having had all of this done to your body. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, such a good point, and so important. And I feel that it is absolutely imperative that emotional well-being and mindset work is actually up there as the highest priority when you're going through fertility stuff. And the thing is that, yes, you are so desperate and you just want to do anything. And that was absolutely me. I just wanted to get to the end result. I just wanted to have a baby. And I didn't really, I didn't want to slow down and work on my mindset. I didn't want to slow down and do a gratitude practice. I just wanted to have a blimmin' baby like everyone else was doing. But what I learned through this whole process was that actually, once you do get to that stage and you do get pregnant and you do have the baby, your emotional and mental health is just so, so important. And the more in touch with who you are and what you need on any given day, the better able you're going to be able to manage that period and to be able to manage that trauma that is with you. And lots of people who are in my community have also been through loss. They've been through incredibly traumatic experiences, or they might have had a traumatic birth, which really does stay with you as well. My first birth was quite traumatic, and I recently had some birth trauma counselling before I had my second baby this year in February. So trauma is a really important part of all of this to process and to recognize, as you rightly say. And I think that validation is just so huge for anyone experiencing a difficult road to parenthood, to validate how incredibly hard it is, and that you try everything. I mean, you literally would go out in the garden and do a dance under the full moon holding 10 crystals in your hand. If someone told you that was going to work, you would do it. You don't even care. You don't care what you look like. You don't care what people think. You're like, this is going to work. I'm going to do it. I've got to have my baby. And it's all consuming, and it's very, and it impacts every area of your life. So, and the trauma, as you say, on your body, your physicality, I think women just kind of go, well, this is what needs to happen, so I'm just going to put myself through it, and me and my body are just going to have to cope. And actually, we really need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our bodies and our hearts and our souls and our minds holistically to be able to manage the intensity of what you actually go through to have that baby.
So having gone through all of that and then having a positive outcome in the form of your daughter, you then went on to have a second baby earlier on this year. Can you talk about what you did differently that time around than when you think about what you did the first time?
So when we decided to try for another baby, I really, truly, genuinely was in the mindset of thinking, if I never have another baby, I am actually absolutely okay with that. I felt very at peace and accepting of our position. I felt incredibly grateful that we had Matilda. And I just thought, if this happens again, what a huge bonus. How lucky would we be? So I didn't feel that sense of desperation that I had with my first child. I felt that I went into trying with a very open mindset. So we tried naturally for about 10 months because my periods had regulated, and we never discovered another reason why we weren't conceiving. So we thought, well, it's always possible. And everyone tells you, oh, once you've had one, you'll probably get pregnant really easily the next time. So we were like, well, we'll give it a go. Didn't happen for us. So we decided to, rather than just keep trying, after about 10 months, we were like, well, we've got some frozen embryos. Again, very fortunately, we had some frozen embryos. So I just called up my doctor we had gone privately in the end, because with the NHS clinic here in the UK, after I'd been through all of those failed rounds of treatment, and then I told them that I wanted to move to IVF, they then said, well, that's a different waiting list. You'll need to wait probably for about a year. And at that point, having already gone through 10 failed rounds, I thought, I can't wait a year to start IVF. So I basically remortgaged my house. I just did whatever I could to go privately and have that round of IVF. So anyway, to come back to where we were with the second baby, I just called up my doctor. I said, I think I want to have a frozen embryo transfer. What's the protocol? And then we went through it, and it was really straightforward. And I want to say that with a very, again, we were so very lucky with that it didn't need a lot of medication, because my body had started to do what it was supposed to do anyway. So all I needed to do at that point was to track my ovulation, which worked because I was having periods, tell him when I'd ovulated, and we scheduled in the transfer. And unbelievably, it worked again. So it almost was like having a baby naturally for me, like to compare, to the first time, which was just so hard. The second time was very different, even though it was an IVF transfer, an IVF baby, it was a completely different experience, mindset, as well as everything else.
You had your baby in February this year, and then we went in the UK, we went into lockdown in March. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of having a newborn in lockdown while also caring for yourself and healing from birth?
Do you know, I'm almost welling up here, Lenise, because this is the first time someone's actually, asked me about how that was. And I have to say, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever been through. It was just so challenging because, it was so unexpected. It was so unknown. It was so scary. And, after I'd had Matilda, which, as I said, it was a little bit of a traumatic birth. It didn't really go to plan, and I lost a lot of blood, and I physically needed to go to surgery after I'd had her, like straight, an hour after I'd had her. I had to go to surgery for 2 hours without her and be, repaired, because I'd had such a damaging birth experience. So when I was pregnant with Reggie, I really didn't know what to do about the birth. And in the end, after a lot of conversations with my midwife team and everything, we decided on a planned C-section. And I, as I said, had birth trauma counseling to help me to sort of come to terms with all of that. So I had this C-section, and so when I'd had Reggie, I was recovering from major surgery. I was postpartum anyway, which is a very, very overwhelming time. But what I had put in place, because of my experience with Matilda, which I had found really overwhelming, becoming a mum after all of that, I'd said to everyone around me, I'd said to my family, I'd said to my friends, I am not leaving my bed for 3 weeks. You guys can come and help me. I'm going to lie here. I'm going to really try to just take this as easy. I'm going to get all of the help I need and that I want, and all of that. And I kind of had I felt really, really lucky that I was going to get another go at kind of that newborn era, and that I was just going to try and be really accepting of the broken sleep, and I was going to just sink into it. So I was kind of, I was ready. And that first 5 weeks after he was born, as challenging as they were, because having a baby is hard, I was also in quite a good headspace, and I had lots of help, and my sisters were coming around, and my mum was there, and my mother-in-law came, and I felt quite held. And then all of a sudden, lockdown happened, and I actually remember being over at my neighbour's house, because our kids went to nursery. Matilda and her little boy went to nursery together, and they were playing after nursery, and we were watching the news, and they said they were going to close the nursery, and that there was no mixing with other households. And I just thought, how am I going to manage this? Reggie was not sleeping. He was a very refluxy newborn. He was being sick all the time. He had the loudest cry you've ever heard in your life. I mean, people literally commented on it in the hospital. The second he came out, he screamed the place down. Everyone in the theatre said, "Wow, good luck with that." Literally, that's what they said to us, and we were like, "Oh, thanks! Oh my god!" And so he was not a relaxed little thing. He was a challenging newborn. And we were not sleeping, we really were not sleeping. We were getting a few hours sleep every night. And then all of a sudden, Matilda was there all day, every day. Simon was still supposed to be working at that point. So for the first 6 weeks, he was still working, trying to. And I had to look after Reggie and Matilda 24/7 with no help. And it was, one of the most difficult things I've ever had to get through. So when Simon was furloughed, that was just the biggest relief ever. Because I had some help, and I could at least take a little bit of a rest here and there. But still, it was, as everyone had, it's been one of the most difficult years in living memory, hasn't it? And we've all had our own, mountains to climb and battles to fight. So that was mine.
What I find so interesting about you is you have this incredibly heart-rending story, and you've been through so much. But then when you look at your Instagram, which is how we connected, you never get the sense of everything that you're going through or you've gone through, because the work that you do is about supporting other women and being there and offering them guidance through their fertility journey. Talk about how you're able to separate that and why you decided to make that separation.
That's such a good question. So I made that decision. I started my Instagram knowing exactly what I wanted to share and being very, very clear about what my mission was on that account. So it was never a kind of personal account that kind of documented my journey and then changed into something else. It began as a support account, and it always was going to be. So I always knew that I would never really be sharing the intimate detail of what was happening personally for me on a day-to-day level. But, I do try and share my life, because I believe that is how we connect, isn't it? That's how we get to know people. And I want people to know me as a person, to understand that, I'm offering the support through my lived experience, and, they're gonna respond to me or not respond to me, judging on, how we get along as people. But when I really started to go, okay, I'm going to start not really talking about my life as a mum here, because I just don't think it's serving the people that I want to help. And my mission really is to find the people who are really, really struggling, and to bring them in and to really guide them into a place of peace and acceptance and joy and positivity, as well as acceptance of the difficult feelings that they're also going to be having, so that actually by the time they've finished working with me, and I actually have just launched my new 6-week course, so that's really what that does, is to try to get people into a place where seeing, people living lives as parents isn't going to be as damaging and triggering for them, because they've come into a much better or more healthy headspace. But I just felt that, sharing the ins and outs of how hard my life was on that page just wasn't really appropriate, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it, which is why I then set up my other page, which is my mum account. So I've got my Alice Rose the Mama, where I'm very real and I'm very open. And actually, I got so much support myself through sharing that side during lockdown. And that was an amazing thing for me to have, while I was going through that sleepless, difficult time, just sharing on my other page and going, I'm really struggling today, and just having messages from other women and other mums just going, we're here with you, solidarity, we can do this, was just amazing. So it's kind of nice, because I've got my one where I support people, but then I'm also filling my own cup up, with the other one. And that is so important.
So talk a little bit more about the work you do. So if a listener is hearing this and thinking, I need that support, I'm going through a lot right now, I need that support, how can they get in touch with you? What support have you been able to access that you think would be worth listeners who are going through the same journey accessing?
So I am a huge advocate of finding the support that you need. And I think that, there's loads of different options in terms of support. But if you're looking for a counsellor or a coach, the counsellor specifically, you would go to BICA, which is the British International Counselling Association, or you would go to Fertility Network UK, or you would go to Instagram, and you would type in the hashtags fertility coach, fertility counsellor, and people will come up. You'll be able to find, if that's what you want. If you want one-to-one support, then that's where I would recommend that you go. If you're looking for immediate kind of online support, that's where I can help, because what I wanted myself when I was going through this kind of stuff was just kind of things that I could action personally, without having to wait for an appointment or pay a lot of money for an appointment or make time in my day, for that. What I wanted was just to be able to take ownership of what was happening. So that's what I've created for people. That I've got my, online mini mindset course, which is just a 10-day, £20 option. I've got a 5-day course for £10. I've got my little mini meditation. So I've got, for £5 again, I've got my self-compassion for a pregnancy announcement meditation, for example. So I've tried to make them really specific, because it's those moments of just being knocked sideways when, a friend of yours announces a pregnancy, or a family member, or, someone in your life announces something, and you feel absolutely on the floor. You feel devastated. I actually put a post together with the words that people sent in to me about how it made them feel. And someone was saying it's like being punched in the throat. It's, and it's this physical, visceral, incredibly dark feeling. And then you layer on top this guilt, because you're supposed to be happy. And not only are you supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be happy immediately that someone tells you. So it's a really, really tough one. So that is a specific little meditation for that. And it really helps to just take people out from that place of guilt and darkness and pain and grief, and just to validate how they're feeling, and to give them that gentle but powerful reframe to go, do you know what? I'm a human being. I'm having a really hard time. And it really soothes, and it really takes them out of that. So that's the kind of support that I am working on and that I offer. And the 6-week course that I've just launched is a group thing. So we'll start that soon. I imagine by the time this goes out that we'll be deep within it, but it will run periodically now throughout the year.
Anyone who's interested, all the links will be in the show notes. So you can access the course if you're interested and go find out more about Alice there. What about men who are going alongside of this with their partners? You hear a lot about support for women. Mm-hmm. What about the men? What can men do who maybe they're suffering in silence, or being in the UK, stiff upper lipping it? Yeah. What can they do?
So, this is such a huge thing. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's something that, so I work as well with my business partner, Kat, and we have an events company called Kat and Alice. It's events and consulting. So we also work with brands and things to try and give patient insights around fertility. So we can help people with fertility policies at work, and we help them to look at their how fertility is represented in the media. I've worked a lot with the BBC in terms of just sharing different stories and things. And the events that we did run before 2020 happened, we were really mindful of this. And it's really difficult, because the first ever event that we ran, which was a full day event, lifestyle event, we kind of call them, and it's not medical, so we don't really have doctors and people from clinics there. What we do is bring in, life coaches and holistic things, and share stories, and have panel events and that kind of thing. Really make people feel relevant and part of society, because so much you feel sidelined when you haven't got kids, or you're trying to have a second baby, and that's not working very easily. So our first event, we said it was open to everyone, and one man came. So we realized we had a little bit of a problem, because obviously we were speaking to a really, a female sort of skewed audience, and that was what was happening with our events. So the second one, we just said, right, this one's for women. We're going to do something else for men coming up. And we just had about 80 women all came to our next one. And then what we then did for our Christmas party last year, we just said, this is for everybody. And we had loads of men come to that. And it felt amazing to just see everyone coming together in couples, or, it just felt like a really welcoming, normal, and I'm doing quotation marks kind of thing, because it wasn't really a fertility event. It was just it was a party in a really nice venue in London. And it was an opportunity for people to come together as people just going through a similar experience. And that was really important to us, that we recognized that, men are so very much a part of this too. And they're just not noticed a lot of the time. They don't even get spoken to directly in appointments sometimes. And, even recently I've done lives with clinics, and constantly throughout the conversation, I'm, they saying, and women this and women that, and I'm always going, yes, and the men, and the men and the men and the men, because it just is seen as a female issue, and it's absolutely not. So what can men do? I think this is really hard, because they sort of need to take a little bit of action themselves in order to engage with the support that's out there. But people are starting to offer more. And there's James Kemsley, I think his name is a coach who is really active in trying to promote the support for men. There's also been quite a lot of new Instagram accounts when it comes to male infertility support. So go and have a look on Instagram, type in, male support, infertility, whatever it is that you can find with the hashtag. There is a growing Instagram community around that as well. So it's there. It needs a little bit more digging out and more spotlight shone on it, but it is there.
So everything that you've said, your story, I know that there will be listeners who will really connect with what you're saying. If you want to leave them with one thing, one little pearl of wisdom to take away, what would you want that to be?
I think my go-to is to remember to take things day by day, because a lot of the time what we do is live in the future, and we get so wrapped up in the anxiety and fear and panic that, what if this never happens, or what will I do if that happens? And it's incredibly stressful. So the more that we can work on being present, the more that we can work on taking things, if it's hour by hour, even, especially when you're in a 2-week wait, which is when, the time in between ovulation or fertility treatment and finding out whether it's worked, that's such a difficult time for so many people. So the more that we can work on presence, the better. So day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute is what I would leave you with.
So taking a very yogic approach, being present in what's happening to you. Take it minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Alice, for sharing your story, for your openness and honesty. And for listeners who want to connect with you on Instagram, can you just say your handle?
This is Alice Rose is my Instagram handle, which sounds a bit dramatic, but that Alice Rose was taken. So yes, this is Alice Rose, and my website is thisisalicerose.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more inspiring conversations, head over to periodstorypod.com, where we have so many more for you to peruse. If you want help with your menstrual or hormone health, email me on hello@eatlovemove.com to set up a free 30-minute hormone health review. If you like today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Tag us, come say hi, and send in your requests for who you'd like to see on the show on Instagram and Twitter on @periodstorypod, or email us at hello@periodstorypod.com. I'm Lenise Brothers, and you've been listening to Period Story. Thank you so much for listening.